I'm Bob Von Bargen, President Emeritus of the Armed Forces Heritage Museum and your host for this series. In this episode, you will hear Colonel Holm tell you about his work with a humanitarian agency that is helping the Afghan community. He will relate his experience during a life-saving flight to save survivors of a devastating avalanche high in the mountains. Here's Colonel Holm.
I was an advisor. I was an Mi-17 pilot, photo taker. I love taking pictures. But one thing I want to talk about now is shifting to a mission that I did to help people help children in Afghanistan. I don't know if I really did, but a friend of mine named Rick Montgomery, I went to high school with him, Lincoln High School in Portland, Oregon. We graduated in 1984. In 2009, I missed my 25th high school reunion. And Rick Montgomery got on Facebook and he chewed me out. Why aren't you at the reunion? Well, I'm in Afghanistan. I go, you're in Afghanistan? What are you doing to help the children of Afghanistan? I said, I don't know, Rick. I'm trying to make the government more stable. This is in the summer of 2009. And Rick told me about Global Roots, this non-government organization that he had started when he was in Tibet. And then he decided he wanted to help children all over the world. He was a high-end tour guide, and he started in Tibet, and then he went to Cambodia, and then he opened up an orphanage in Kenya. This is something he did. This is something that he felt empowered to do, and he did. And it was just incredible that he started up this non-government organization. So naturally, he asked me, "What are you doing to help the children of Afghanistan?" I said, "Well, how are the kids doing?" I said, "Well, I really can't interact with them in Kabul. It's kind of a war zone, but the kids out in the villages are really nice." And what about orphanages? What have you done to help with the orphans? I said, Rick, I can't leave the base. You just can't do that. And I said, look, I'm busy. You're bothering me. And I kind of kept blowing him off, if you will. And he kept pestering me. What are you doing to help? He wanted to do something in Afghanistan. That was his intent. And so this picture right here, it's titled "The Time to Act," and it shows me up at the fence in Kabul. And it was right after Halloween. It was in November of 2009, and my two sons had collected all their Halloween candy to give to me to give to the children of Afghanistan, which was a nice gesture. And so I had this opportunity. I drove up. There were some children playing right next to the fence, and I drove up my vehicle, and I took these boxes, full of candy, and I started throwing the candy over the fence, and that's what you see on the picture. What I didn't anticipate was the children aggressively attacking the fence, climbing the fence, getting stuck in the concertina. The gate guards starting to yell at me a couple hundred yards away because they'd heard threats of children being with suicide vests, and that's not untrue. And it got so bad with the kids that I had to back away, and I felt horrified at what these kids' situations were in. And I thought about Rick, and I thought about me blowing him off, and I said, okay, I'm going to do something. And so I contacted Rick, and I said, Rick, what do you want me to do? He goes, great. He wires me $2,500, actually gave my wife $2,500. I put it into our checking account. I went to a debit card and started withdrawing it. It was in a very odd place with gunfire in the background, typical. Anyway, my friend Saeed, my interpreter, a person that I trusted my life with, is in this next picture, and is just the sweetest young man, 25 years old at the time. And I asked Saeed to find me an orphanage in Kabul where we could operate safely. That's reputable. As you know, corruption's a big part in Afghanistan. So I said, could you please go out and find an orphanage that we could support? And he goes, yes, no problem. And he went and he found an orphanage. And then you have to go through a process. You have to go through a legal process. In this case, it was the chaplains that ran any support operations by U.S. forces done individually for orphanages or any other enterprises. So I went to the chaplains agency. I said, I've got this orphanage. I'd like to help them. And they said, okay, now I have to plan a convoy. Now I have to get materials. I got $2,500. Saeed, my friend, he went and bought, he went to the orphanage and said, what do you need? They need winter clothes, they need shoes, they need winter clothes and shoes, primarily, and socks. $2,500 goes a long ways. And there was several hundred children in this orphanage, and we were able to purchase enough clothes on the local economy. Saeed did, my interpreter, and we planned to deliver those on a convoy to down into downtown Kabul. So I worked with, I talked to my American airmen, and I said, look, this is what I want to do. Does anybody want to help? And I had to push people back. The airmen all wanted to volunteer to help with this mission. And so we made a plan, and we looked for a date to set the date, and the date didn't work. Couldn't get the vehicles. It's not easy to do a convoy. It's a high-risk mission. Kabul is not a safe place for U.S. convoys. Anyway, so one day we were able to get it done, but I happened to be gone. I was in Gardez doing a mission in my helicopter, and so my second in command, I said, make this mission happen. So on Christmas Eve, nothing to do with Christmas. Obviously, we couldn't go and proselytize and say Merry Christmas to a Muslim nation's orphans. That would be very, very bad. But it just happened to be that was Christmas. So for us, in the next slide, shows the first Global Routes supported mission by my unit, the 438th Expeditionary Wing, and Global Routes money. And it was a huge success, as you could see from the children. I don't know who had a better time, the airmen that got to deliver the clothing items or the children, but it was just a tremendous success. So much so, even though I didn't get to participate on it, Rick was just absolutely enthusiastic to come back and do this again. And I thought, okay, I thought I was going to get rid of him, but now he wants me to do more. And in fact, Rick says, well, I want to come to Afghanistan. I go, Rick, you're not coming to Afghanistan. It's dangerous here. Not coming to Afghanistan. Rick, you're not doing it. And just like it was the summer before, he kept persisting. And sure enough, Rick Montgomery in February of 2010 shows up. And I had to coordinate for him to stay on the base with the Spanish government because they own the base, with the U.S. government for the 438th, with the Afghan government. They all agreed to sponsor Rick to come to Afghanistan to live on the base so we'd be safe. I said, you're not going to live downtown. If you're going to come, you're going to come and stay with me, and we'll protect you. We'll put you out on our convoys. You'll fly on my helicopters. And the idea was for Rick to come over and learn about the Afghan system in dealing with orphanages. What does it take to support an orphanage in Afghanistan? And then the next step of that process was, that region in northeast Afghanistan is so remote, but it happened to be at the time kind of safe because there wasn't very much Taliban activity, to go up in that region where other NGOs, non-governmental organizations, couldn't go because they didn't have helicopters. He had his buddy, Olaf, that happened to know the commanding general of the Afghan Army Air Corps, who might agree to give him a helicopter to fly supplies to an orphanage in northeast Afghanistan. That was the idea. He wanted to start an orphanage or support an orphanage in northeast Afghanistan, but first start in Kabul. So he showed up, and this picture shows Rick meeting General Asadullah and General Barat, established relationships, became good friends, bared gifts, and we asked, can we ask for a helicopter? And they said, yes, no problem. Mishka Ness, my friend. And but first, he meets the relationship with the Afghans. The next picture shows him going out actually to the orphanage, and he brought more money, and we bought more supplies. And Rick was able to go see this particular orphanage that now the Global Roots is basically sponsoring, and my organization, the 438th. So we went, we did another convoy, and all the training and planning and everything associated with that. And he did a really good job, and he got a real understanding. But that wasn't enough for Rick. Olaf, we need to go to Badakhshan, he says. Okay, so I contact, through Saeed, the sub-governor of Badakhshan, and we're going to take off in an Mi-17 helicopter bearing gifts. I was able to accumulate some civil affairs blankets and materials because it was right in the middle of winter, February, and there was a lot of requirements for that. So we were going to fly up to northeast Afghanistan and drop off these blankets, and Rick was going to meet the sub-governor to talk about setting up an orphanage in Afghanistan. Simple. Problem. The Salang Pass. Remember that picture, the beautiful mountains? On the day we were going to take off full of blankets to go meet with the sub-governor, there was a massive avalanche in the Salang Pass. where we found out from a German, I don't know what he was doing up on the road. It was the main thoroughfare between northern and southern Afghanistan. Had his cell phone. He says, I'm trapped in an avalanche. And that's where the U.S. forces and got involved to go help this German. Well, we found out there were hundreds of Afghans, if not thousands, trapped on this road, with hundreds maybe of killed or missing. Massive avalanche. And I also found out that no U.S. helicopters were in the area with hoists to be able to do it. The Mi-17 had a hoist and could go do this because we're talking 11,000 feet. The Blackhawks was too high. So I got involved. I was working with my old rescue guys up at Bagram Air Force Base. I said, give me some PJs, pararescuemen, and we'll go up and we'll go do this rescue. And then I went to General Barat. General Barat, you've got Afghans up in the mountains that are dying. We need to go help them. Olaf, sit down. Have some chai. No, General Barat, I know what you're going to say. We have people that need to be rescued right now. You are a hero of Afghanistan. I literally said that. We need to help your people. Olaf, it's too high. It's too high. We cannot go that high. I go, General, I take out a chart. I show him the chart with this helicopter. We can go up to this altitude. He goes, but Olaf, it's too windy. And I go, General, the wind is coming right down the nose, and I laid it out, show him that we could land there. And he was so concerned, but he says, okay, you can have helicopters. And so I went out to the helicopter. We had two of them. And I couldn't find my medic. And I had some medical people I needed to go. This is up at 11,000 feet. And I look at Rick. And I said, Rick, you're a mountain guide, right? My high school buddy from 1984. Yeah. Well, do you mind being my medic on this mission? And he goes, okay. So here it is. I remember talking to Rick in 1984 at our last day. I said, Rick, tell you what, in 25 years, you and me, we're going to meet up in Afghanistan. We're going to go do a rescue in an Afghan helicopter, an Afghan-marked Russian helicopter up at 11,000 feet. You in? I mean, that's just a real typical plan. So it was just kind of a crazy situation, but that's what we did. We took off with two helicopters. I had primarily an American crew on mine with an Afghan flight engineer and then another helicopter with an American pilot. And we went up there and we ended up rescuing 75 people. In the next picture, this is what we saw, where we had freezing people up in the mountains. And we worked with the U.S. military. By then had CH-47s, Chinook helicopters that could land. And we worked with TAC-Ps on the ground. And I did 2 flights and 3 flights. It shows pictures in here. You can see Rick in the back of the helicopter carrying troops, and then another picture showing the people in the back. This is a really interesting moment for Rick in the story, in that he had never been around such catastrophe. There were bodies being loaded in the back of our helicopter. There were frozen people that were shaking and some of them barely alive, some of them getting CPR done on them. And Rick had money on board. He had taken several $1,000s to talk to the sub-governor of Badakhshan. And what he did was he gave each individual, and in our helicopter we actually rescued 52 people, gave them each a $20 bill. That goes a long way, because we flew them from the Saling Pass up in the mountains down to Bagram Air Force Base. How are they going to get home? All their belongings are in the avalanche. And Rick gave them each $20. In fact, at one point there was a young man that had his legs frozen up to his knees. Now, what kind of person, you talk about giving the shirt off your back. Rick took his shoes off and gave this man his socks and put them on this guy. That's Rick Montgomery. That's a great human being. It was a tremendous experience for him, and it was very difficult because at one point it was getting dark and all the Americans had left. They wouldn't operate at night. And I didn't have NVGs, but it was so lit up from the snow. And we were going from just looking for survivors and landing on rock cliffs, and it was pretty dramatic. But at one point, I was maxed out. I had 25 people in the back of the helicopter, and we were at 11,400 feet. That's a lot of people. And I said, Rick, we got to go. But Olaf, there's more people. I said, Rick, we got to go. And that's bothered him because he saw people that we left behind. And the next day, we went up and picked up a lot of bodies that didn't make it through the night. And for him, that was very difficult. But I think he understood the difficulties that we were dealing with, and we had life and death, and that was something altogether he didn't expect. And the last picture shows us when in a break period while we were getting refueled down in Bagram Air Force Base, and it shows my co-pilot Kurt Wickers, who was also flying with me. The mission with Rick, it started it. He went to the orphanage in Kabul, but we didn't make it up to Badakhshan because of that sling pass. The weather was never good enough for us to get north, and he had to go back to the United States. So in May, a couple months later, he sent his good friend Patrick Foizon up from another member of the Global Roots. Now, Patrick's an interesting individual because he's a French citizen that grew up in Iran, that lived in China, worked for Amazon, on vacation in Afghanistan to help the children of Afghanistan. I mean, really, quite a normal guy. Anyway, he came over to try to get to Badakhshan. So Rick sent more money, and at the same time, I also worked with a gentleman named Greg Mortensen. Greg Mortensen was a mentor to Rick to try to get him involved with Afghanistan. Greg Mortensen wrote 3 Cups of Tea and Stones to Schools. And he also wanted to do a mission up to Badakhshan. In this case, he wanted us to deliver a generator up to northeast Afghanistan. And so Patrick showed up. His mission was to go up to northeast Afghanistan and also work with the orphanage back in Kabul, continue that operation. So he shows up, and oh, by the way, since he grew up in Iran, the language in Iran is Farsi. The primary language of the government in Afghanistan is Dari. Farsi and Dari is like a dialect between New Jersey and Alabama. Maybe difficult, but he comes in here as this white guy. He walks up to General Barat. You see his picture in there, just laughing, because here's a guy speaking fluently and almost in his language, and developed a huge relationship right off the bat. What do you need? You need more helicopters? No problem. Mishkinanes. And so first thing we wanted to do, General Asadullah took us to his school, because General Asadullah, the group commander, wanted to see if we could do something for his school. So we went out and visited his school and met his family. And we went to the orphanage again. It was quite
the humanitarian work of the military as a social agency is not new. As always, it complements the diplomacy and is dependent upon funding. Future episodes will expand on this aspect of Colonel Holm's achievement while in Afghanistan. Stay tuned to the next episode, and we will learn of a heroic action that puts Colonel Holm and his helicopter crew in the midst of a terrorist act. See you then.